All right, we're going to do a class example of writing an equation in standard form with a different scenario, and then we'll calculate a couple things and we'll graph it, and we'll do a few different examples like this. But this one we're going to do together. You can watch the video, do it with me, and then you're going to try some on your own. So here's our scenario. Your school had a fundraiser. They sold baskets for $8 each and boxes of candy for $5 each. They raised a total of $600. Let X represent the number of baskets sold and Y represent the number of boxes of candy sold. Write an equation in standard form. So here we don't have to define our variables because they're actually defining them for us. So here we have X is representing the number of baskets, and Y is representing the number of boxes of candy that they sold. So our equation is going to be about how much did they sell. So what do we know about baskets? We know that they sold baskets for $8 each. So $8 each tells us that's a rate. So that rate is going to go with X because X is about baskets and $8 is also about baskets. So I know that 8 times the number of baskets, which is 8X, is going to be however much money they made from just baskets alone. I'm going to add that to the amount of money they made from candy. So for candy, it costs $5 each. So our rate is $5. And it's going to be $5 times the total number of candy boxes that we sold. And Y represents the number of candy boxes that we sold. So 5 gets multiplied times Y. When I take the total number of baskets times the amount we made per basket, this will be our total amount made of just baskets. This is the amount of money we got. 8X is the amount of money we got just from baskets. Then I'm going to add it to the amount of money we got just from candy. $5 times every box of candy we sold will give us the total amount of candy. And I know that when I add those together, I'm going to get the total amount that I collected overall. And if we look in the scenario here, they raised a total of $600. So 8X plus 5Y should equal $600. All right. So look, I have a typo here. We have two part A's. So the next part A, if they sold 50 baskets, how many boxes of candy did they sell? Well, baskets we know is represented by the variable X. So that means X is equal to 50. So I can use my equation that I just wrote, 8X plus 5Y equals 600. But I can substitute in 50 for my X because they're giving me a number of baskets. 8 times 50 plus 5Y equals 600. 8 times 50, do that in my calculator. 8 times 50 is 400. So I have 400 plus 5Y equals 600. So I'm starting to run out of room here. I'm going to move over to the side. Let me rewrite it. 400 plus 5Y equals 600. So I want to solve, so I got to get the 400 on the other side of the equation. So then subtract 400 from both sides because it's a positive 400. I'm going to do the additive inverse. So I'm going to do the opposite of positive 400. I'm going to do minus 400. Those are going to cancel out. I'm going to get 5Y equals 600 minus 400, which I know is 200. I've got 5 times Y. In order to undo that multiplication, I've got to divide. So I've got to do the inverse operation. 5 divided by 5 will be 1. I'll be left with 1Y. Over here, 200 divided by 5. So Y is going to equal 200 divided by 5, which is 40. So that means if we sold 50 baskets, then we sold 40 boxes of candy. Let me write that over here. If we sold 50 baskets, then we sold 40 boxes of candy. So here's that sentence. Go ahead and write that down on your paper. If we sold 50 baskets, then we sold 40 boxes of candy. Here it is a little closer. Pause it if you need to. Okay. So next, part B. How many baskets did they sell if they sold 64 boxes of candy? So now they're reversing it on us. We want to know 64 boxes of candy now is going to be what variable? So boxes of candy was represented by the variable Y. So Y will be equal to 64. I can do the exact same method that I just did, but instead replace my y with a 64. So I've got 8x plus 5y equals 600. I'm going to replace my y with 64. So I'm going to have 8x plus 5 times 64 equals 600. I'm going to go to my calculator. 5 times 64. 8x plus 320 equals 600. Again, running out of room, I'm going to bring it over here to the side. Rewrite it. 8x plus 320 equals 600. Kind of divide this here so we don't get them mixed up. So now I have plus 320. I'm going to have to do the inverse operation. I'm going to have to subtract 320 so that those cancel out, and do it on both sides to keep the equation balanced. So now I've got 8x equals 600 minus 320, which is 280. Divide both sides by 8 because I want to do the inverse operation of 8 times x, get rid of the multiplication by dividing. My 8s will divide out. I'll have 1x equals 280 divided by 8, which is 35. So that tells me that if I sold 64 boxes of candy, we would have also sold 35 baskets. I'm going to write that over here. If we sold 64 boxes of candy, then we sold 35 baskets. Go ahead and write that down on your paper. Hold it a little closer for a second. You can pause it if you need to. All right. Next, C. Find the x-intercept. What does this represent? So the x-intercept is going to be where the graph crosses the x-axis. And so on the x-axis, that's where y is equal to 0. So my x-intercept is where y is equal to 0. So I can take my equation, 8x plus 5y equals 600. Let me divide this here. Okay. I can, if I know y is equal to 0, I know this 5y is going to disappear. Cover that up. I'll have 8x equals 600. To get rid of 8x, to get rid of the 8 in front of the 8x, 8 times x, I'm going to do division. So I'm going to divide by 8, divide by 8. 600 divided by 8 is 75. X equals 75. So my x-intercept is 75, 0. Now, the second part of the equation says, what does this represent? So if this is my x-intercept, we want to know in our story, what does that x-intercept mean? So it means when I sell 75 baskets, I have sold no candy boxes. So when x is equal to 75, or my baskets are 75, there are no candy boxes sold. If 75 baskets are sold, then there are 0 boxes of candy sold. And we've done that before. We've written sentences like that before when looking at x and y intercepts, and we're looking at it in our last unit. So that should be a familiar sentence. And now we're going to look in part D and find the y-intercept and write down what that means. So if I'm looking at the y-intercept, that means that's when x is equal to 0. So if that's when x is equal to 0, I am going to, let me open up my paper here, some more room. I am going to rewrite my equation, 8x plus 5y equals 600. But if x is going to be equal to 0, I'm going to cross that out, and I'll have 5y equals 600. Divide by 5 on both sides. Y is going to equal 600 divided by 5, which is 120. So what does that 120 mean? Well, first of all, my y-intercept is when x is 0, so 0, 120. So my y-intercept is going to be, if x is 0, I sold 0 baskets, then I sold all 120 boxes of candy. If there are 0 baskets sold, then there are 120 boxes of candy sold. So it's the number of boxes of candy sold when no baskets are sold. So all I sold, only candy, is my y-intercept, 120 boxes of candy. Or I sold only baskets, that's my x-intercept, 75 baskets and no candy. Okay, so the next step is to make our graph. So again, we have this 20 by 20 square of a graph. We have to graph our two intercepts. We just figured them out, so that's helpful. We've got 75, 0, and 0, 120. So I've got to label my graph, label both axes. I've got to title my graph, and I've got to figure out my scale. So first of all, we can call this school fundraiser at the top. Okay, X is representing the number of baskets sold. Label that at the bottom. And then Y, I'm going to turn it here, is going to be the number of candy boxes sold. Number of boxes of candy sold. Okay. And let's see, on the x-axis I have to get up to 75. I know there's 20 boxes. I could again make each of them 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, you have to write small, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, and 95, 100. Okay, very tiny. So if I'm going to graph my 75, 0, I'm going to put it right here, right on the 75 line, make a big dot. Make it a little bit bigger for you. Hard to see. Right. Okay, so then I've got to do 0, 120. So if I only count by 5s, I'm only going to make it to 100. I'm not going to get high enough. So I'm going to have to change. Maybe I'll count by 10s on the side here. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140. That's funny. So I've got to make a point exactly on 120. I've got my point on my x-axis, I've got my point on my y-axis. I'm going to grab my ruler, connect them, make a line, go through each axis a little bit so I can put an arrow on the end. It's okay if I went through my words a little bit. And there's my graph. There you go. You should be ready to do some of these on your own. So go ahead and find me in the room and ask me for the next work that you can do.